Ron was just saying, you know, if you were to develop a radical new initiative that would decentralize artistic support to infuse these non-traditional venues and projects with funding, what would that look like?
My answer is I don't know, but something that I think is really interesting. I can't remember the name of the site, but there's a website that teachers can go to and apply for quick turnaround grants for classroom materials. They don't even have to fill a grant application. You say, I need this much money, yes, right? And it's up to like $500, or it's not a very large amount, right? Right?
Philanthropic Ventures Foundation, just to get that on the record.
Thank you. I'm really bad with names and things. So I think that's a great idea, personally. I don't know, we'd have to think about, you know, what's the amount that would make the most sense to actually be useful, but it'd be great to just be able to apply every so often to a revolving fund where you say, I need $1,000 to do this thing. Wonderful, right? And we have some of those kinds of things, creative capacity funds, and folks can mention them, that are fairly quick turnaround. But this idea of not having to write anything, really, just I send something in, I get the money. That would be really great, right? That'd be great. So I think we can also, as funders, to be more creative in thinking about other mechanisms for investment. So there's not a Kickstarter that gets born every day, but I didn't see a lot of grantmakers really jumping on the wagon to support that vehicle, which has now led to a lot of projects and individual artists being able to fundraise for themselves outside of a grant writing system and structure. So I think there are also ways in which we could be thinking much more broadly about ways we can support artists that aren't direct grants, even though I know that is very important, but that can create other opportunities that are often generated that we wouldn't come up with ourselves. So. Other folks want to jump on that? Get to dream a little?
I have a question more about the presenting model and how we're able to unravel not only audience expectations of when something is going to happen and how it's going to happen, but also how we unravel artists' expectations. And, you know, so for so long, artists have kind of, well, I'm not going to say all artists, but certain artists that I've come across have kind of seen, oh, I need to have something that looks like a season, and then I really have like made it, or then I'm really legitimate. So that's one part, and I think the other part of it for me is I would like to hear examples from anyone in the room, successful presentations where there's been like an increase in visibility, as well as kind of multiple streams of revenue. So not just a foundational grant. When you have a free performance, it's free. You know, you don't have people giving. So it's just, those are the two things that I was interested in.
Well, is there somebody in the audience who wants to respond to that? I know everybody, I know we're all kind of doing the same work, so there's this group up here, but I know everybody is pulling work together here in this room. But I think that one thing when I was at the foundation that we kind of tried to encourage people and support really is this idea of like building your individual donor base. And how do artists do that? Like, because if we pass around a hat, we'll get some money. Like, we'll get money, you'll get, you know, you could probably get, you know, $50 tonight, you know, for your work. But so I think it's just about kind of building that confidence and having those conversations with each other about like, well, your work, I get, you know, as an individual that your work is worth that much, but then like, how is it that you show up to do that and ask for that money, because and allow yourself to do that. And that's one thing that my group is kind of grappling with, because we had a fundraiser this one day that's in the back of some Mexican restaurant on 24th Street in this like patio that's not used often, Casa Sanchez, they're great. And we walked away with $1,700, like, because we let people know what we were doing. Like, we're like, you know, we're really like not trying to go on a fancy vacation. Like, we're trying to record a CD, or which is a revenue builder, right? And so how can we let people know so that they have something tangible to latch onto, and then how, as administrators, not only artists, but administrators do, because that's what you are. As an artist, you're an administrator to a certain degree, unless you have some luxury of having a nice wife or husband or somebody who loves you who's gonna like do that for you, which some people have, God bless them, but a lot of us don't, you know, and so we have to be the administrator and the artist. So how do you capture those names, engage those people through and act like a small institution? And I think that one thing that I you know, it's sometimes challenging to find the institution that fits your work as well, to present your work. And I think that's a question I have about, you know, what kind of venues do we need for electronica music or for whatever work you're doing, and how do we engage with builders, community development people, or with funders and our fellow artists to create those spaces. We just lost one recently, right? Mama Calizos. And so what do we need to do to recreate that?
I also just want to hit that from a presenter standpoint. In the presenting community, I feel like there's this sort of idea that non-traditional performance venues and these alternative events are great, but really the value is that they're going to get people to want to pay to come and see a show at 8 o'clock on a Friday or Saturday night. So the value then keeps coming back to this traditional practice that we've identified that is revenue generating, right? And the other practices are used to feed that practice. And I think that's something that I'd really like to explode. But you're right, you know, to put on a free event, you need some other source of income, and then we're looking towards funders to provide that. And I think, you know, how can we get creative outside of those two models?
Hello, so I'm Jan Sadonio, and I do run a space named Kunst of Arts. A space that it's 1 year old. It used to be actually on Fifth and Market. It was one corridor, one room, and was very easy to manage. And then because of some structural problems, we moved on a venue that is actually double the size. And I'm coming to this point where I'm thinking, okay, what do I do with the space? How can I bring people in? How can I share that with, first of all, with my colleagues, and as well to bring in people to experience what kind of work we've been creating. So the turnaround was very fast, so I didn't even have time to approach any funders. So I just looked around for people like myself, see who has similar needs. So a group of people came, it's like, okay, I want to be there, I want to support it, it's cool, let's do that. So one space is a basement, the other one is a wonderful 2,500 square foot with three sides of windows and all that stuff. So how do I make the funding? How do I, you know, make the space work? Is by talking to people that have similar needs, because again, I didn't have the time to go. By the time my founder gets the conversation and say, yes, let me look, maybe the next round, I didn't have the time to wait for that. So I had 4 days to just do that shift. So I think it's a tremendous need in the community to trust yourself and bring a product that people can actually understand and use and utilize. I think it's one way of producing as well revenue. The other point that I wanted to make is when you have a space and you have these events, you're like, okay, well, 4th of July, this and this and that. I was just like, you know what, let's have an event on the 4th of July. Let's have an event the Valentine's Day. And actually those events have been very successful. And I don't want to feel as a dancer or as a creator, as an artist, that I'm secondary to the Oscars. So actually I have an event, the Oscar night. Even if I have less people, at least I know I can put myself, I feel that I'm strong and equally to what my beliefs are, to go against the Oscar night. And I would say for all of us, if we're gonna really go, what is available is very little. Very, very little. It's a huge competition. The theater used to be the space where people would go. Now, it's the TV, it's this and that, drag shows, it's a competition already here, So how do we believe of what we do? How do we present that? How do we use the prime time to do it? And also being alternative and being smart and doing, Monday morning, because you never know. Some people, if you're in Berlin, Monday mornings, a lot of people are, free. So anyway, those are 2 points.
Thank you.
Really to the issue of how do you generate funds or revenues, right? Outside of what we know, foundation or revenue. You know, I don't know necessarily the answer to that because I think we're at a turn, socially, economically. I mean, you've heard that, but we all feel that we're at a turn. And I think more and more the way, when I think about our organization, I think about, we talk a lot about, we just went through this whole strategic redirection. And one of the things that we talked about, I mean, a lot is innovation, but what became more apparent, I mean, and of course, like how do you navigate a course through unpredictable times? I think getting the view of where we're at, I mean, I think it was more evident to see that we do have diverse, again, back to our very diversity has created also diverse forms of income, so that if you were to just look at our portfolio, I think and believe me, we're feeling it too, but I think in general, there's something there. There's something about like the diversity of ways you can get incomes. And then I also think with the Big Idea Night, you know, I engineered that, and I had to really draw from my experience in the 80s and 90s as a club promoter. And that's one model that actually works and supports the self-represents art, and especially here, in probably New York at a certain time, LA at certain times, art was happening at these spaces. I mean, I used to go to, you know, clubs, James St. James. I mean, it would be like the kind of thing that's happening at something where it's an event, it's a happening. It's, you know, you're just going to go there and take a chance. So I think the two things that we're looking at right now very seriously, not only as an organization, but as a society overall, is that cash, you know, cash is still cash, but participation now in our culture has become a huge thing. You do the free to get the participation. Now what do you do with all that participation? For Big Idea Nights, you get more participation, and you do it over time, right? And we haven't found the answer. Then I thought, okay, well, all right, if you're letting them in free, you slip into club mentality, you're letting folks in free, well, hopefully you'll make some money from the drinks. That's not proving to be true either. You know what I mean? But then there's other mechanisms. Then you have to look further. Like, why isn't that happening? You know, we have an amazing union that runs basically it runs our theaters and our performance spaces. Within our own organization, we have economies we have to deal with, like realities we have to deal with alone. And so a Big Idea Night costs a lot of money to put on, right? And when, you know, and the foundation funding's gone away. So it's one of those things where, I don't know if there's an answer, but there's something about cash and now participation. What do you do with that participation? And there's evidence all around us. People who are paying farm bill real money for like virtual or not material assets. It's connected to what we're doing because it's telling us how people are collectively behaving and what our values are and what the potential of that participation is. So I think right now when we don't have answers, I think maybe we can do what artists do best, and that's to deeply observe. There's an organization in St. Louis that I'm dying to visit, and I just did a panel with them where they've taken art and creativity and created a program for new and emerging businesses to go the artist's way. LLCs, this organization has created a program for LLCs to get into artistic thinking about how to design their LLCs and how to solve their problems. And what's amazing about that, and of course we say, oh my God, that has to do with business, that has nothing to do with what we do, there's human values, etc. At the end of the day, what they've proven is that creativity or the tools that we use, the things that come to us as both intuition, as art and science, can be used in other ways. You know, another brilliant example of that is visual thinking strategies. Do you guys know VTS? which is a classic art education thing that, you know, it's about deeply like spending time with work and just asking basic questions. Jessica and I were talking about, what do you see? What more do you see? What makes you say that? You know, in this process, it's been very successful in K through 12, but they've moved it outside of the arts, and they're finding that it's working for medical students who are doing far better by deeply observing the things they're doing. And wouldn't you, I mean, isn't it thrilling that there are future generations of doctors who are better observers, right? So I'm thinking about what other elements in the arts, in our art making, the science in the work that we do, that's applicable. And more than anything, it's not just a cheap shot at like making money at a desperate time, but really, how is art moving into the humanities? How is art evolving outside of its specialized spaces in its categories where we're talking about legitimacy and everything else? Because we already know that artists and societies moved on, but it is the very tools and it's the very spaces, and even us in the industry who are having a harder time, like, you know, moving along with it. So I think the more limber and the more quick we are to be able to do that, I think the more interesting we'll get.
Wow, that's a lot to think about. Do you want to pass the microphone down there? And then, oh, yes, thank you.
Okay, hi. I suppose what I was thinking about earlier, which then goes along with what you just said, has something to do with what you were saying with the insularness of the community. But I was thinking that the conversation is going a lot around funding, which of course is a very strong part of legitimacy, right? But when I was just wondering what our culture has to do with all of this, and thinking about the cultural perspective of legitimacy, and you know, because it's not just about the money that you get when you get presented at YBCA, for example. It's also about your peers and the wider culture around you seeing YBCA as an important institution, or as a big building, or as something that they recognize. And so I was thinking about our culture as this arts community, and as the wider sort of like big American culture, which led me to think about lots of other things. But I was wondering, beyond funding, what the way that while we are here talking about other ways of presenting and showing our work and developing audiences and all of that, the ways in which we are also implicated in our actions and in the tickets that we buy and all of that, how we are implicating ourselves in the cyclical pattern of the presenting model that we're in.
Absolutely. Thank you.